It was a calm afternoon when John Miller pulled up his dusty old truck beside the wooden fence of his newly bought ranch. The soft sound of the wind passing through the dry grass made him smile. After working years in construction, saving every cent he could, John finally owned his dreamland. The ranch wasn't fancy. A small wooden house, a worn-out barn, and a few acres of peaceful open field. But for him, it was freedom. No bosses, no loud neighbors, just peace and hard work under the open sky. For a few days, everything was perfect. John fixed the fence, painted the front door, and parked his old pickup beside the porch, the same truck that had carried his tools for more than 20 years. He didn't bother anyone. But then came the trouble, in the form of a woman named Linda Parker, known by everyone in the neighborhood as the HOA lady, or simply, Karen. Linda was the kind of person who believed she ran the entire community. She wore neat clothes, carried a clipboard, and loved giving orders. The first time she came by, she didn't even say hello. She just stood at John's gate, frowning. "Excuse me," she said in a sharp tone. "You can't park that rusty truck there. It ruins the view of the neighborhood." John smiled politely. "Ma'am, this is my property. I don't think your HOA rules apply here." She crossed her arms. "Every home here is under the association. You'll have to move it. We have standards." John tried to stay calm. "I bought this ranch from the county, not through your association. My land's outside your area." But she didn't believe him. "I'll check that," she said coldly and walked away. John shrugged it off and went back to work. He thought it was over, but the next morning a bright orange paper was stuck to his front door. "HOA violation, improper vehicle storage," it read. He couldn't help but laugh. His old truck was parked neatly beside his fence. There wasn't anything wrong with it. Later that day, he decided to visit Linda to clear things up. Her house was big, with perfect white fences and trimmed grass that looked more like plastic than real. When she opened the door, she gave him a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Parker," John said kindly, "I think there's been some confusion. My ranch isn't part of the HOA." She waved her hand. "Don't try to argue. Everyone who lives around here must follow the rules." "I respect your rules, ma'am," John said patiently, "but my land is outside your area. I checked the maps before buying it." Her smile vanished. "You people always say that," she muttered. "Don't think you can come here and do whatever you want. We keep this neighborhood clean and respectable." John noticed the tone in her voice, but he didn't say a word. He simply nodded and walked back home. He wasn't one to fight over nonsense. But that night, as he sat on his porch drinking coffee, he had a feeling this wasn't the last he'd hear from her. He was right. The next morning, just as he was feeding his dog, he heard sirens. Blue and red lights flashed against his barn wall. 2 police cars stopped right in front of his gate. Linda stood nearby, arms crossed, looking proud and certain she had finally taught him a lesson. John walked out calmly. "Morning, officers," he said with a small smile. One of the officers stepped forward. He was young, tall, with a confident walk. But the moment he saw John, he froze. His face changed from serious to shocked. "Dad?" he said in disbelief. Linda blinked in confusion. "Excuse me? Did you just call him?" The officer took off his sunglasses and smiled wide. "Yeah, this man isn't breaking any law. He's my father." Linda's mouth fell open. "That's impossible. I called you because he's violating community laws." The younger officer beside him looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said softly, "we'll need to confirm the HOA boundary before we can act." But Linda wasn't listening. "He's lowering property values. Look at that truck. It's ancient." John sighed. "Ma'am, this truck's been my friend longer than most folks here. And again, your rules don't apply to this land." She glared at him. "Oh, you think you can do anything you want just because your son wears a badge?" The officer, John's son, Deputy David Miller, looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, the sheriff's office doesn't enforce HOA rules. And from what I know, this ranch isn't part of your district." Linda's voice rose. "That's not true. I've lived here for 15 years. Every house follows my rules." David turned to his partner. "Let's confirm the property lines." The other officer pulled out a tablet and typed a few things. After a moment, he said, "She's wrong, sir. This property's registered as private county land, not under the HOA's authority." Linda's face turned red. "There must be a mistake." David shook his head. "No mistake. Ma'am, please stop calling law enforcement for personal disputes. If you continue, you may face a fine for false reporting." Her voice cracked. "But he's ruining the look of the neighborhood." "Then don't look," John said quietly, trying not to laugh. David smiled. "Dad, you good here?" "I'm fine, son," John replied proudly. "Didn't expect my morning coffee to come with flashing lights, though." The officers left after warning Linda. She stood frozen, realizing her plan had completely failed. John walked back to his porch, still calm, but this time with a small grin. As the police cars drove away, Linda shouted from across the road, "You'll regret this. I'll talk to the HOA board." John called back, "You do that, ma'am. And maybe bring a map next time." When she stormed off, his dog barked once as if cheering. John leaned back in his chair, sipping the rest of his coffee. He had been through much tougher days than this. Years of hard work, long nights, and difficult people. A loud neighbor with a clipboard wasn't going to scare him. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange over the quiet ranch. John looked around his land and the barn, the fences, the open field, and smiled. He had earned this peace. He didn't know that this small argument was only the beginning. Because Linda wasn't done yet. She was already planning her next move, and she had no idea that the man she was trying to fight had not only the law on his side, but the sheriff himself as family. John just chuckled softly to himself as the wind rustled the grass. "Some people never learn," he murmured. And with that, he turned off the porch light and went inside, ready for whatever came next. 2 days later, the sun rose over John's ranch, shining on quiet fields that had finally returned to peace. The old truck sat proudly beside the barn, just where it belonged. John had gone back to his normal work, fixing fences, watering the small garden, and enjoying the quiet sound of birds instead of sirens. He thought the whole mess with the HOA was finally over. But Linda Parker wasn't someone who gave up easily. By late morning, John heard the rumble of car engines outside his fence. When he stepped out onto the porch, he saw 3 cars parked along the road. Out came Linda, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and carrying a folder full of papers. Behind her were 2 men and another woman, all holding clipboards. They started taking pictures of his barn, his truck, and even his mailbox. John sighed, knowing she was up to something again. "Morning, ma'am," he said calmly, leaning on the porch railing. Linda ignored the greeting. "We're here on official HOA inspection business," she said loudly. "You've ignored several notices. This time we'll fine you for every single day that truck stays there." John raised an eyebrow. "Fine me on my own land?" One of the men whispered, "Are you sure this property is part of our HOA?" Linda shot him a glare. "Of course it is. I checked the old map myself." She turned back to John. "You'll receive your fine in the mail, and if you refuse to pay, we'll call law enforcement again." John couldn't help but smile. "Please do. Maybe this time bring the right paperwork." Her face turned red. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she snapped. Before John could answer, a deep rumble came from the road, a large black SUV with gold letters on the side. It rolled slowly up to the gate, and everyone froze when they saw the words County Sheriff's Office. The driver door opened, and out stepped Sheriff David Miller, John's son. His badge gleamed under the morning sun. He looked calm, but his eyes told everyone that he meant business. Linda's whole face lit up. "Oh, thank goodness. Sheriff, you're just in time. This man refuses to follow the community rules. I've been trying to reason with him, but he's breaking every code we have." The sheriff looked from Linda to his father. "Morning, Dad," he said with a small smile. "Morning, son," John replied, hiding his grin behind his coffee mug. Linda blinked in confusion. "Wait, your dad?" The sheriff nodded. "Yes, ma'am. This is my father. What seems to be the issue here?" Linda quickly flipped through her papers. "He's parking an unapproved vehicle, leaving tools outside and making the area look unpresentable. It's against HOA regulations." David listened patiently. When she finished, he said in a calm, firm tone, "Ma'am, this property is not under your HOA's authority." Linda frowned. "That's impossible. I've lived here for 15 years. All these houses are part of the association." The sheriff took out a folded document from his jacket. "This is the updated zoning map from the county office. Your HOA boundary ends 2 streets before this ranch. You have no control or legal authority here." Linda's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The other board members began to look uneasy. One of them muttered, "I told you this wasn't in our area." David continued, Also, calling law enforcement repeatedly for personal disputes can be considered misuse of public resources. I'm going to record this as an official warning. Linda's face turned pale. But Sheriff, I didn't know. He gave her a polite but firm look. Now you do. You can't fine, threaten, or harass someone who isn't under your HOA. If this happens again, it could lead to charges for harassment. John stayed quiet, watching his son handle everything like a professional. He felt proud, remembering the young boy who once helped him fix fences now standing tall in a sheriff's uniform. Linda tried one last time. Sheriff, look at that truck. It's an eyesore. Surely there must be something you can do. David smiled politely. That truck has more right to be here than your clipboard, ma'am. It's on private property and my father can park wherever he wishes. The other board members took a step back, mumbling apologies to John. One even said quietly, Sorry, sir. We didn't know. Linda looked defeated. Her power, her confidence, all of it faded in front of the sheriff's calm authority. She turned toward her car, clutching her folder tight. Before she left, David called out, Ma'am, one more thing. The county doesn't look kindly on people who cause trouble for honest citizens. Let's keep things peaceful from now on. Linda didn't answer. She just got in her car and drove away slowly, her face red with embarrassment. John laughed softly once she was gone. Didn't think I'd need my own son to protect me from the neighborhood patrol. David chuckled. You always said you wanted backup someday. They sat on the porch for a while after that, just enjoying the silence. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. Dad, you sure know how to pick neighbors. John smirked. Oh, they make life interesting. Word spread quickly around town about what happened. People started greeting John differently now. Some stopped by to apologize for the way Linda had treated him. Others came just to shake his hand and hear the story of how the sheriff put the HOA lady in her place. Days turned into weeks and John's ranch became peaceful again. The fields grew green, the truck stayed parked by the barn, and the orange notices stopped coming. Sometimes he'd see Linda driving by, avoiding eye contact, pretending not to notice him, but John always gave a friendly wave anyway, because he wasn't the type to hold grudges. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky golden, David stopped by again. He brought 2 cups of coffee and sat next to his father. Everything quiet? He asked. Peaceful as ever, John said. Guess people finally learned where the lines are. David smiled. You know, when I was little, you always said a man's peace is worth protecting. Now I understand what you meant. John nodded. Peace doesn't mean you never stand up for yourself. It means you don't let people take away what's yours. They sat there quietly, watching the sky fade from gold to purple. The land around them was calm, the air soft and still. John felt a deep sense of pride, not just for his ranch, but for the son who had become a fair and respected man. The next morning, as he worked in the barn, a small envelope arrived in his mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note. Mr. Miller, I want to apologize for my behavior. I understand now that your land is private and I went too far. Please accept my apology. Linda Parker. John smiled as he read it. He placed the note on the table inside his house, not out of pride, but as a reminder that patience and kindness can win even the hardest battles. From that day on, the ranch stayed peaceful. The neighbors became friendly, and even Linda started waving from a distance. The old truck stayed parked where it had always been, standing proud like a symbol of quiet strength. John never wanted revenge or victory, just respect and peace on his land. And thanks to a good son who wore the badge of justice, he finally had both. As the wind moved softly through the tall grass, John sat back in his chair, coffee in hand, smiling at the horizon. For the first time in years, everything felt exactly right.